quick intro, my name is Andy Hunt. I'm the Vieth Director of the Center for Real Estate at Marquette University. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. BizTimes, thank you for putting on this great event, which for another year, almost 20 in a row now, we've packed a room. We have some pretty amazing panelists here today, and we're going to dive into some discussion, and they're not afraid to talk, so let's dive right into it. First, next to my left is Tim Gokhman. Tim is Managing Director for our Milwaukee-based multifamily residential real estate development firm, Newell Enterprises. One of his recent projects includes the Ascent Timber Tower downtown, which has helped make Milwaukee even more world famous. It's the beer and mass timber now. So thank you to Tim for that. Marianne Burish, Executive Vice President with Transwestern, commercial real estate broker and multidisciplinary practice leader in the Transwestern's Milwaukee office. More recently, she did one of the deals of the year, the Cardinal Ridge campus sale, and that's something that we might have a chance to dive into because that was phenomenal, Marianne. Kevin Newell, one of the most amazing developers in our market and people. Kevin's president and CEO of Milwaukee-based development firm Royal Capital. Thrive on King is one of his big projects that is just opening now, which we're all excited about. But boy, are you seeming like you're getting it really right with this lifestyle campus in Brown Deer too, Kevin, and maybe we'll dive into that. And then last but certainly not least, Derek Taylor. Derek is Chief Operating Officer with Milwaukee-based real estate development and investment firm Three Leaf Partners. Their recent projects, including Taxco Apartments in Walker's Point and the Fitz on the east side, they've taken the market by storm with some of their growth. And it looks like we're putting all the attorneys on that side of the panel, so we have that going for us as well. All right, so we did not jump right into questions with Spencer. Now is our time to do a little bit of that as we transition to our panel. And I've given our panelists the opportunity to kind of start off by saying, hey, what was it that you heard from Spencer in this presentation that might pique your interest? We're going to start with Tim, and he probably knows that because he's sitting directly to my left. That's your fault for doing that. Let's dive in. Tim, Spencer's presentation, wow, right?
My favorite things, I wrote down that you walk every market, right? He doesn't drive through every market on the highway. He walks every market. So we're going to come back to walkability, which is a key aspect of the third ward. And then the other thing that I loved was that low cost is a race to the bottom. And I think that is, that type of conservative thinking is something that still drags Milwaukee down. Now, a comment that you made that I'm curious about, you said interest rates deteriorated the housing market where we have a shortage. I would make the argument that we were doing a great job of screwing up the housing market before interest rates went up. We had, 15 years of low interest rates, and still we're not able to produce enough housing. And so interest rates are clearly not the only component. And in Milwaukee, where permitting time is 6 months, that's not the only component. So there's more to it than that. What else do you think are the biggest factors?
Well, as part of my role on the roundtable, I'm also on the subcommittee on affordable housing, and I wrote a paper on what is the real problem. And tragically, the real problem is NIMBYism. People don't want affordable housing in their communities. And by the way, they're equal opportunity offenders here. This is not the right or the left, they're both of them. And so people think that affordable housing, all these negative stereotypes associated with them, most of which are false. And so I would say that the political will, so since we're not in California, I'll throw California under the bus for just a second here. So California has by far the worst housing crisis in America. People are considered to be quote unquote housing poor if they pay more than 30% of their take home pay in housing. In California, the average person pays more than 50%. So California tried to solve it a few years ago by what was known as Article 50 to allow people to build much faster. Again, remember the permitting comment I made? Right along train lines, and it was shot down by all of these suburban communities. They didn't want people there. So until we have a massive political shift on NIMBYism, by the way, it's just as bad in inner cities as it is in suburbans. That's the number one impediment to more housing.
So, Marianne, one of the slides that Spencer had up that was really compelling to me was the slide about how BOVs and how they've changed over the last 3 years. I thought that was very interesting. Curious to hear, your sense. If truly, if BOVs are up nationally, and we're looking at a 90 to 120 day, precursor to that impact and increase in transaction volume, hopefully, please, happening. Are we seeing something similar to that here? And then Spencer, maybe we can respond more to the local level.
I think we are seeing an increase in BOV activity. Whether or not it produces deal volume in 90 to 120 days, I think that metric may have been a little bit more accurate pre-pandemic. I think post-pandemic, everything takes a lot longer, and one of the challenges in selling properties, especially if they're going to be going back to special servicers and things like that, is there is still a pricing disconnect between what sellers will accept and where buyers are at, and that pricing delta is starting to collapse a little bit. I think there are non-distressed sellers who see what interest rates have done in the last 6 to 8 months, and now are saying, hey, I should have sold 6 months ago, I should have sold 9 months ago. But whether or not, everyone's sort of hoping that in 2024, interest rates are going to minimally stabilize and ideally retreat. Well, maybe they do and maybe they don't. And I think it's probably a better approach, is just my personal opinion, to assume that they're going to remain on or about where they are, maybe some nominal retreat. But I don't think, personally, we're going back to 4 or 5 or even 6% money in 2024, 2025. And that's what's causing a lot of the inertia in the marketplaces. Everyone's sitting around thinking there's going to be a retreat. Well, maybe there isn't, maybe there isn't, but I think minimally you should probably have a parallel track or strategy, one if they do, one if they don't. And at what point are you going to make your real estate decisions?
And you mentioned this may be different. It sounds like that's exactly what Marianne is saying. BOVs now, you were like, well, usually that would happen, but I've been wrong before. I don't know that I trust this. Do you not necessarily trust that because of those reasons exactly?
Well, I think I agree with most of what Marianne just said. The only area where I might differ is I agree interest rates are going to stay higher through 2024. I do think we are going to see a material drop in 25. And that's where you see that split between Wall Street and the economist community. Because I think we are going to have a slowdown and people are going to want to stimulate. So I think that if people believe the Wall Street point of view, maybe they should have a liquidation strategy in the next 2 years. But if they believe our point of view, maybe holding another year might be in their best interest.
So Kevin, you are, I want to touch on housing. You've done such an incredible job. You also have some great visibility into other markets nationally, especially the Atlanta area. And so you kind of bring that to the table here, which I find great. There's so much in Spencer's presentation that we could dive into on housing. I feel like we need to dive in even more to this idea of, all right, you have to go down from Class A to workforce to Capital A affordable. I feel like you've done that really well. What's that journey been like for you, relating to what Spencer had to say?
Hard, very, very hard. It's hard work, but I do think that we have, a lot of things going our way inside of the housing market here, but as Spencer kind of talked about. There's challenges, and it's not just suburban challenges in terms of NIMBYism. I hate to look over to my left and see my good friend Jim Boers from Zilbert Limited. I drugged them into a fight in 2011, 2012 in the city of Madison, where we had essentially was acquiring a portfolio of about 350 units across 2 different properties. And the challenge at that point in time really was NIMBYism, where we were coming in, we were buying the asset, asked for no city dollars, and we were simply going to rehab the property and bring in what we thought was going to be some great lifestyle services, after school programming, better connectivity with police and law enforcement through coffee with a cop and things of that nature. Why we ended up in planning commission meetings to 2 o'clock in the morning, I still don't understand. And I thank Jim, because this was very early in my career, and we were, again, I drug him to a hell of a fight, but we won. But it does kind of speak to Spencer's thoughts that this NIMBYism stuff is real, and I understand the scare, which kind of leads me to a question for Spencer. We had a little bit of debate about this. I think your words was mission creepy. Mm-hmm. But Spencer kind of talked about the fact that real estate is all local. right? And so we just say our metro region is our business. And we have neighborhoods, which I would call micro, right? We have Third Ward, we have downtown Fifth Ward, we have Brookfield, we have all these different micro regions. But we start looking at the macro issues. Spencer, what kind of challenges are you seeing for similar cities as Milwaukee in terms of crime and education? Because when I'm looking at trying to build for a community, I'm always having the end user in mind, whether it's single family homes, apartments, or whatever the case may be. And as a father, I'm always thinking about education and crime. What kind of influence does education and crime play into these overall models right now, even though it may be out of our hands as real estate professionals?
So you should know I live in Baltimore. All right, so I have seen the belly of the beast for 20 years of crime and other things like that, some of the most difficult issues. And I'm on the board of directors of a school in Baltimore called the Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women, which I was a founding member, 15 years, and every one of our girls goes to college, so we're proud of that. But every time I go in front of the school board, I'm the enemy, the school board. And that is the fundamental challenge. And the entrenched interest in the education business is as strong, if not stronger, than the NIMBY lobby of people who are outside of it. So if I was king for a day, I would do one thing, and this is an admission against interest. My kids all went to private school, all of them. I would ban every private school, put every kid in public school. Because why? The best thing for a poor kid sitting next to them is a rich kid. Not because the rich kid's better, because that rich kid has voice and has influence and could make it better. Right now, all the people with the influence have left, and the people that have remained in the school system have perhaps not the kid's best interest in mind at every time. And so it is, NIMBYism is a macro issue that involves everybody, but most of it boils down to I don't want them in my school. And that's, cutting right to the chase, and the schools aren't getting any better, and people who can opt out do opt out. And we need to reverse that trend too.
Oh, we got
Can I add?
mission creepy, haven't we?
Well, and I'll add, right, the United States is the only place in the world that funds school districts with local property taxes. We're the only ones.
Exhibit A.
So this is a panel, this is an event where we have not been shy about going after these issues. So I'm glad that we brought this up, and I think there's going to be more to come on this as well. There's a lot to learn from these other markets. Derek, you have spent some time in Texas. We like your tie today, by the way. It's a good UT type representation. But you guys do a lot of development where the approvals process is going to really matter. NIMBYism is certainly something that you're experiencing as well. We all are. But you've also noted from what you've seen in other markets that there's some things that they have done well. What are things when you look here at Milwaukee, seeing what you see elsewhere, you wish we could do a little more? Can you talk about those stories, and maybe Spencer can reflect on that too?
Yeah, happy to. I thought a couple of the slides Spencer showed really tell the story. If you noticed and I'll focus on Texas because that's what I know, and Wisconsin. Now, I've been here 10 years, so. But a couple of the slides you saw, Austin and Dallas-Fort Worth, both in the top 10 of tech and talent availability there. And that's one of the things I think that we here in Wisconsin can do better with programs like Marquette and Andy and UW-Madison is really getting the message out about the great talent that we have here locally and building around that to encourage more corporate relocations and people to kind of center around that talent. And so that's a big one. I mean, we've talked about housing and filling the housing all the way down. That's really important. So having a real strategy around workforce housing, and so not just at the capital A affordable housing or the market rate multifamily, but a real strategy around workforce housing. And I think a lot of that starts with simplifying and expediting the zoning and rezoning process, which is something the city of Milwaukee is keen to now, and we're hearing about that with BOZA. That will be a big sea change, I think, locally here to see if that's effective and if they can roll that out and get the buy-in that you need to do that. So I think those are a couple of things that interest us, and I'd be interested to hear, too, what Spencer's thoughts are on what he's seen in other markets and around talent and attracting that population growth that we need to see here in Milwaukee in particular.
So I don't get along with every mayor or chamber of commerce I meet because I'm direct. I say the same thing. I say, your city is immobile, but talent and capital will go to where they have the best opportunities. That's it. So I'll give an example of Orlando as an example. So I've been going to Orlando longer than I've been coming to Milwaukee, because I used to cover a family of company called the C&L family of companies that were based downtown. We've been going to downtown Orlando for 30 years. With the exception of the new convention center, downtown Orlando has not changed in 30 years because the politics down there are impossible. That doesn't mean Orlando isn't one of the fastest growing cities in America. Why? Because the money picked up and moved to places like Lake Nona, which is 2/3 the size of Manhattan, has the largest veterans hospital, has an innovation center, largest children's hospital, mixed income housing, world-class golf course, because they said, you know what, we can't save you downtown, we're going to do it right here. Same thing applies to Texas. So Dallas, everybody's favorite market. Downtown Dallas, no bueno. Frisco, great. North Dallas, great. But there's a lot of these markets that have these old school downtowns that have literally, and I say this tragically, abandoned the downtowns and just went someplace else. Not because it doesn't make logical sense to reuse the buildings, to reuse the infrastructure that's there. Because the politics are impossible. And so the capital and the people will go to Frisco or to North Dallas, or they'll go to Milwaukee to the 3rd Ward versus another neighborhood because it's cool, right? So the bottom line is, what I see nationally is even in some of these fast growth markets, there's still sub-markets that have been left behind.
So I want to transition to one of the slides that Tracy showed. And by the way, Tracy, again, to be commended, CARW, the survey that we do on an annual basis, phenomenal. I don't know about you, but I always look forward to seeing the way that we're thinking as a market. And sometimes the extra questions, the special questions, always pique my interest. One of those the last 2 years has been around a really big idea that we have here in Milwaukee around 794 and whether or not we should take that down. So let's talk about big ideas for a minute. Our panel has some interesting thoughts on this. Spencer, I want you to help settle the debate. We'll come back, we'll talk about what we think, Tim especially. We're looking at taking down a major highway in downtown, freeing up 20 acres of developable space between the river and the lakefront. Mm-hmm. It's about 50-50 that our survey has shown this year on whether or not they're in or they're not. Yeah, thank you. Should we convert that between downtown and the 3rd Ward? It's a big idea, right? And Milwaukee, we're trying to grasp, should we do that or should we not, or should we moderate it? Settle the debate for us. We're 50-50. Where do you come down on something like this?
So I'm sure all of the advocates for it have done their job of showing the Boston case study when they took down the roadway in the middle of Boston and made the commute time from Logan Airport to downtown from an hour to 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, things like that made a big difference, right? You take a look at the new development in Northern Virginia where Amazon put HQ2. They didn't get any dollars directly to Amazon. What they got was the city is building a walking bridge to Reagan Airport. So, I mean, having the ability to get there, and they're also pulling the Amtrak down again. So I will point to all kinds of positive studies for it. But I think on the negative side is, how could the dollars be spent better? And is there a way to take those dollars and find neighborhoods within the city that are already improving? And I'm sure taking down a major highway like that is a multi-billion-dollar job. I can't even fathom what the number is going to be. I can think of a lot of uses for that money that might be better if they were done most efficiently. But once again, it comes back to the same problem. What's in it for me? And what's in it for me is the problem in Chicago, is that they have a system there, a ward system, where it's too much democracy, so to speak, right? Too much local democracy. So I can't speak specifically to it. I can give you positive case studies, but I believe strongly that productivity is the only way to win, and putting your dollars in the most productive uses, even if it doesn't help your particular district.
I don't have an answer to that question, but I think that graph clearly shows that the issue needs to be studied more. There's really no clear decision in that graph.
I think Tim wants to close it out. So I'll jump in. I'm probably not as passionate about this topic as Tim, so I'll yield all the floor to you. I totally agree with Spencer on the indoor type of a concept, but also I think it's a matter of timing, right? I would not probably be in favor of doing something that doesn't have a plan. The Park East Corridor sat vacant for a considerable amount of time, which was essentially us doing demoing of a major thoroughway in our downtown. And before the Milwaukee Bucks came in and did their entertainment district, it was not a great place to be. It was an eyesore. So I would probably say once we can prove and advance the work that's going on in the Deer District, and I'm biased, obviously, I'm a developer and investor there, so, but I do think it's a matter of timing. So we can figure that out. I think it can be a huge investment, worthwhile for the community.
Tim, mic drop. Tim, I agree. We know you're a big advocate, but one of the things that you're best at, I think, is bringing big ideas back here to Milwaukee. So we could spend time talking about 794. I prefer you to share a little bit more about your thoughts on that larger item, that idea that, boy, how can we take risks here? How can we do big things in Milwaukee?
Well, not only how can we take big risks, but why is it important to take big risks? And I think Spencer closed the case. That's it, right? So the case studies are out there as to why this works. The dollars, if the freeway was in perfectly fine condition and we were just talking about taking it down, yes, that's money spent. But we're talking about ongoing replacement at hundreds of $1 millions. And what nobody's talking about are the maintenance costs of elevated freeway decks versus the maintenance costs of a regular city street, which are night and day. So the dollars also make sense on taking down 794. But going back to your point about, right, low cost is the race to the bottom, designed by committee and studying things that experts already know and taking, where's that slide of the general sentiment? Go back to the slide on the general sentiment from wherever this study came from on what was going to be overbuilt in 2019. And every one of those predictions is wrong. Apartments, office. When has general sentiment, I'm sorry to say, ever yielded the best policy forward, especially when you need something transformative? And let's be realistic, when we're talking about competing with other cities for tech talent, we don't have UW-Madison in Milwaukee. We don't have UCLA. There is no AMD Micron plant being here. There's no Intel plant being built here. There's a Microsoft data center. So how are you going to get the best talent in the United States that can go anywhere to come to this city? And the answer is by doing big, bold things on public infrastructure that makes people that can live anywhere in the United States look at Milwaukee and say, hey, they're doing some really cool shit. And I'm just going to go live there because I can and I want to. That's the answer.
The underlying, I think, theme to this is leadership, actually. And so I can transition very easily to talking about how, okay, design by committee, but then let's talk about leadership and how it takes leadership to get things done, and we can relate that to government. And we have a great person to talk about a national view here as it relates to that. I love your quote, Spencer, about don't give me money. This is what you say to your elected officials, don't give me money, give me my time, all right? And you see that all over the place. It sounds like that's a theme for you on a national level. Now, this is for our developers here. Do we have a problem with permitting and things like that? And let's not stay with just downtown, where I know you have done a lot of stuff, Kevin. Let's also go with some of the suburban stuff with Derek. I know you can speak to that as well. And maybe, Spencer, you can respond back to that.
Yeah, so let's start suburban first, and then we'll work our way into Milwaukee. We've had a lot of success recently. Municipalities around where we've done projects. We closed just yesterday on a new multifamily project in Saukville. Got a lot of support there locally for that development. We will be closing soon on a large multifamily development in West Dallas, and we've had a lot of support from the city of West Dallas in that development. We see that the municipalities are very supportive and wanting to see growth and economic development in their region, and they're putting the tools on the table to help accomplish that. I think we've dealt with NIMBYism in a number of communities and continue to. It's real. And even as real as people having said in the past, we want to see housing here. but when you propose housing in their backyard, they don't want to see it anymore, and they come out and they coalesce around that opposition. So we're fighting that as everyone's fighting that. I think that as the city of Milwaukee is concerned, we've done projects. You mentioned a couple of them, the FITS, and you mentioned Taxco, both one of those in Walker's Point, one on the Near East Side. The downtown district is a different story. We've tried for years with Matt Burrow and his relationship with MSOE to develop sites around MSOE and have been unsuccessful in doing that. It's been a challenging process, but we're encouraged by some of the recent developments and discussions going on with DCD and with streamlining the BOZA process. I think if they find a way to do that, right, I think you have to invest also in the city staff to expedite that process. So you've got to have people who can carry out those inspections and carry out the permitting process. And one of the issues, and I don't think it's unique to the city of Milwaukee, is keeping people working at the city of Milwaukee, keeping that continuity so people know what's going on in the city and they can help move things along. Those are some of the things that I think would help speed that along.
You know, I think that are there any politicians in the room first? I probably should say that, because I do think that we are in a position where our city is being held back, probably held hostage because of the lack of innovation, the lack of desire to want to be better and stronger and more durable. And it's, I mean, we're building a high school right now in the city of Milwaukee. 500 students, a part of Thrive On. And you would have thought that bringing a high school, bringing healthcare research, bringing mixed income housing, family housing, senior housing, all these great things would be like well received on King Drive in Milwaukee, right? The objection, the protests, the challenges, the process of getting work done in this neighborhood that I'm committed to, you would have thought I was an outsider, right? So it's a significant challenge that we have here, where we just don't probably believe in big ideas. So I think that it is a significant problem, and it's not subject to just one neighborhood or just the city of Milwaukee. It's a global, regional issue where we don't beat our chest and speak of ourselves in the same light, so we don't even think that some of this stuff is possible. So overall, I think it's a significant challenge.
Spencer, any comments to that?
Am I allowed to say big ideas up here?
Of course.
All right, so just talking about why. We know the what. We're all in violent agreement on the what. Well, why? It's because there is a disincentive for politicians to disagree with the locals in every district, everywhere in America. And so one of the things that I fight a lot is, and I'm an affordable housing advocate, big time. I fight rent control. Why do I fight rent control? I fight it because it reduces supply. And you know who agreed with me on that? Hakeem Jeffries, because I was in a meeting with the guy a year ago, right? He's right. I mean, you know, maybe the bottom line is you need new supply to solve the problems. But you know who doesn't vote? New supply doesn't vote. You know who votes? Existing supply. And so here's my big idea, and I write op-eds all the time for newspapers. And so the one where I got the greatest number, the second most nasty grams on this one. By the way, the comment section should be banned. They're like, wow, where did this come from? But, so I'm going to give you a couple of cities that, you know, what do these cities have in common, and what do these cities don't have in common? Okay, so here are cities that have in common. Orlando, Nashville, Indianapolis. Commonality. I'll give you three cities that also have something in common. Baltimore, St. Louis, Memphis. What do they all have in common? The three first ones and the three bottom ones. The first three merged the city and the county. The bottom three didn't. Bump. The answer speaks for itself. The growth in those three cities is far greater than the growth in the three other cities because it is flight from the city to other places, and the people that stay in the city are voting for policies that are not in the long-term interest of the city. And so the only way to save Baltimore, I said, was to merge it. And believe me, people didn't like that in the county any more than they'd like it in other counties out here. But the point is, you think that that's somebody else's problem? Wrong answer. You're one region, and they need to be together.
That is a big idea. Yeah, Tim, of
So
course.
on the permitting
Yeah.
side, what I'll say is the city of Milwaukee is, compared to other cities nationally, great at permitting, working through issues, right? We do a great job. Erica Roberts is leaving her position at DNS. My understanding is that the city is going to be doing a national search for a new commissioner, and I think that's an opportunity to bring technology and better processes in. But, show of hands. How many of you within the last, 12 months have emailed a local official in support of a project like, let's say, housing? So when we talk about what the problems are, we can sit up here and talk about what the problems are, but every time I'm in the room, I also want to hear what the solutions are. Some solutions are, we can write op-eds and it's big policy and maybe it happens and maybe it doesn't. And some solutions are really low-hanging fruit. And for all of us who are saying we want to see more affordable housing, we want to see better housing policy, we want to see better planning policy, if you haven't emailed your local representative, you're part of the problem. Because it doesn't take a lot, and it has an outsize effect. Let me tell you, because I read every public comment that comes in every public meeting. There are usually only 10 to 12 of them. So every single email in support makes a huge difference. You can do that tomorrow in your community, in an adjacent community, doesn't matter, because that's what politicians are responding to. They're responding to the feedback that they get, and the feedback that they get is usually batshit crazy. Because those are the people that email, so be the counterbalance to that.
I think it's good to talk a little bit about a success story that you've already highlighted, which is the third ward. And if there's a few things that we can learn from that. So Marianne, you are one of the OGs of the third ward and its success. You've seen it grow. You've been part of helping it to become one of the success stories that Spencer says is one of the best submarkets in the country. Throughout that transition, what have you seen? Why was it so successful? Was it just because there weren't a whole bunch of people to vote for NIMBYism to prevent things from happening? Or was it leadership? Or what else was it?
It certainly started with leadership back in the 80s, and the sort of founding fathers of the Third Ward, which were like Peter Renner, Mike Gardner, the other businesses down there, Katie Gingras, Greg Ewan moving Epstein Ewan, buying buildings and moving his company down there, and certainly others that I haven't mentioned. But the Third Ward had something else that really no other part of downtown has, which is the inventory of the turn-of-the-century warehouse buildings, the brick and timber buildings, the concrete frame buildings with the high ceilings, and then it sort of had, it just hit on all cylinders of what resonated with people, including walkability. And it felt, this is a much overused term, but it's true. It was human scale. And it felt like a neighborhood you could, and it remains the case today, you can park once, walk to everything you want to do, get back in your car and go home. So you're not, it's like some people will still complain, oh, I got to drive downtown, I got to pay for parking, oh my God. Yes, you do. But, it's the success of the Third Ward and the public market. The public market is a success story like no other. And month over month, year over year, for the past 10 years, 12 years, since the day they made the decision to let people carry their food out of the place, it's been like this even through the pandemic. So the Third Ward is certainly a unique case study in that regard, but there are certainly other vibrant areas of downtown. But yes, it's an anomaly in our marketplace, a great example of development, and a lot of its success was leadership, policy, practice, augmented by just intrinsically the right physical characteristics.
Can I mention one other thing? Because I am Mr. Amtrak this week. I trained it from Ann Arbor to Chicago and from Ann Arbor to here. And I took the train from Chicago and I walked right through the Third Ward on my way to my office building. That's how I got to do the walkability thing. And I'm not saying people in Milwaukee should work in Chicago. I'm not saying that that's what they should do. It's what they could do if you had a real train between here and Chicago. That train's an embarrassment, all right? And I travel globally. And the fact that you don't have a train that can get you from here to Chicago in less than an hour, unfathomable.
And Spencer, that was going to be an issue I wanted to ask you about given your travels nationally. Public transportation, mass transportation has been a very controversial issue in Milwaukee and Wisconsin for my entire career and probably much longer than that. It's a joke.
Mm-hmm.
And several years ago, there was a big idea, Tim, you like big ideas, to connect and create basically a super regional economy by connecting Milwaukee to the Fox Valley, to Minneapolis, St. Paul, to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Went nowhere fast. That makes all the sense in the world to me, and I think it represents a fantastic way to leave behind or to bring into the fold a lot of our left behind more rural communities in terms of healthcare and technology. But what do you see? How important are transportation links?
It's a mixed bag, and now you got to understand. I'm biased. I grew up in New York. Okay, I took the train every day, commuting, subwaying, Amtrakking. And by the way, you know what the Amtrak cost me on average to go from Baltimore to New York? About $250 each way. You know what the train cost me from Chicago? $40. Right? You say, oh well, yay, it's cheaper, but it took me an hour and a half, and it only ran 3 times a day. And so I'll give you the good example, and I'll give you the bad example, okay, of new infrastructure. The worst one, of course, is the bullet train that they never got off the ground in California, which was going to cost $20 billion. Then it determined it was $100 billion, and it just was a waste of money. But then San Francisco built a subway, new train line, and came in during the pandemic, and it's been a fiscal disaster. But then New York City extended its 7 line from Penn Station down to Hudson Yards, and it revitalized an entire community, right? So I can give you case studies on both sides. Another one is a very good case study you should look at is Seattle, because Seattle has this community right next to it called Bellevue. And Bellevue used to be this sleepy little nice-to-have town. Bellevue is a superior office market to Seattle by a lot right now. And I think partially it's due to that train line that they have that connects them, but also connects them to the airport. So it's not a black and white answer, but there are a lot of examples of super regionality works. But the problem, once again, surprise, comes down to the politics. What's in it for me if I connect to Minneapolis? What's in it for me if I connect to Chicago? Am I drawing jobs away from Milwaukee to Chicago? Maybe. But maybe what you're doing is you're bringing in a greater number of people who are going to live here and solicit the other businesses.
Let's stay on this topic a little bit with the third ward, but relate it to something else where you could provide value here, Spencer. And that's that when you got off the Amtrak train, which we would all love to see something even greater happen with that. Maybe there's that over-democracy in Chicago that might be preventing a little bit of that, of course. But you walked through the third ward to downtown. You didn't take the hop.
I knew the hop existed, by the way.
Can you talk to us? Give us that outsider perspective. What's going on with the hop? What did we do? What did we do wrong? What could we do differently?
Well, let's just be clear. It was 63 degrees yesterday.
It's beautiful, wasn't it?
In November in Milwaukee, and I'd be a fool not to walk. Right?
And you've been here 12 times, and it's always
and believe me, if it was 22 degrees, I would have been on the hop.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so it was really weather related, but also it's what I do for a living. I don't know a market until my feet are on. Every time I pick a dinner reservation, I pick it 3 miles away and walk to it. And I just look around and see what's going on. And it's the only way for all of my professionals in this side of the room, my CBRE professionals that are either in marketing or research, leave the office and walk the city. It's the only way you'll understand it. So nothing wrong with the hop at all. It was just a beautiful weather day, and this is what I do.
Got it. But it was a big idea, and there is a lot of consternation about how impactful and effective it has been here in Milwaukee. You have limited knowledge of something like this, but a transit project like the HOP, which is a big idea, which costs a lot of money, and there's not real consensus that it's working super well. What are your thoughts on that?
So Kansas City is another one of these cities that's like the next man up kind of thing, next person up of great cities. So first I'm going to throw Kansas City under the bus, and then I'm going to resurrect them. I'm an expert in nothing, except for what city has the worst airport in America. And Kansas City had the worst airport in America until recently when they put $3 billion into it, and now it's great, and it's going to take that city to the next level. Folks, I am going home. My car is waiting for me out there. I'm driving to O'Hare, right? Because I couldn't get a decent flight out of Milwaukee. It's a big deal, okay? Improving your airport here so that it is, guys like me can get home is a big deal. So I would just say that some of these things that seem like, oh, whatever, it's not a whatever. Richmond, Virginia is a city I go to quite a bit because it's only about two and a half hours from my house. I was stuck in their airport for 10 hours, right? Because they had like 6 flights a day, right? And there was no train. If you think the train is tough between here and Chicago, try the train between Richmond and Washington, D.C. It's the same deal. It's like, why? This city could be the next city up. It used to be a regional financial hub. So I have too many case studies, but all I'm saying is this, is that the cities that have turned the corner include, say, Salt Lake City, put $3 billion into their airport. Nashville, $3 billion into their airport. Kansas City, not there yet, $3 billion. I don't know why $3 billion is the number, but that's what it is. And so these major modes of transportation bring not only business people into the community, it brings students into the community, and, their parents who are going to spend money downtown. And that is a huge virtuous cycle.
Andy, measuring the hop's efficacy, which is a hub and spoke model, and currently we just have the hub, would be like measuring the efficacy of 794 without 94 and 43.
So you'd be advocate, we need to do more. We stopped too soon.
Without building the connection to the east side to Walker's Point and to Fiserv, it's just a loop. Of course it's not effective. You've got to connect it. But literally, imagine not having 94, not having 43, and just having 794. That'd be pretty ineffective too.
Yeah, we'd love to see it at least get to the airport and out to AmFam Field. That'd be a nice start. But here we go with more big ideas. Let's bring it back to the theme of today's conference a little bit, which is preparing for your next move. So we've talked a little bit about a lot of different things. We've responded to some of the really interesting stuff that you've talked about, Spencer. But we need to look ahead at 2024 and what are we going to do? And so, the question for our panel really comes back to this. When you look at a slowing of what's going on in our marketplace, we all know that there's still things that we're going to have to do in 2024 to prepare. What is that for each of you? Is it some form of we're going to keep doing strategy, or maybe we're going to spend a little more time on the golf course, or be curled up in a fetal position? What is it for each one of you looking forward into 2024? Yeah, oh yeah.
All right, so neither. I don't play golf, and I don't believe in the fetal position. I also don't think that we have to wait. I think we can be better than that. So what I mean by that is going back to the comment that interest rates are destroying the housing environment, and I was saying that we were not doing well enough with really low interest rates. Why? Well, because we're not innovative enough. So the industry has to get better. Post 2008, we stopped stick framing. Everything is now panelized. That's one of the directions we need to move in. We need to become more efficient. We need to become more efficient with financing, right? So one of the challenges we know, capital markets are really constrained right now. So the conversation that we have over and over again is, hey, senior lender, you can only get up to 50% LTC. Let us use PACE. Well, and then there's a conversation about it, right? Let us use this tool. Let us use this tool. But the fact remains that Milwaukee is, pick your study, CoStar, RealPage, whatever. It's the 5th, it's the 4th most constrained housing market in the United States, running 95, 96, 97% average occupancy, no concessions, high single-digit rent growth. So we can build and build and build, and the market not only will be fine, but the market needs it and will not be okay if we don't build. So the conversations around affordable housing, I get it, and you and I are on the same page. But at the same time, every affordable housing tax credit that's available gets used up, and there are more applications for it than dollars available. So clearly, there need to be other financing mechanisms explored by the city, by the county, by the state, in order to allow us to build more little A affordable or workforce housing. So what is Newland focused on? We're best known for Ascent, our shiny mass timber high-rise, and we will continue developing that strategy around the country. But at the same time, my big focus for 24 and 2025 is cracking that workforce housing model.
I like the idea, though, of, I would summarize a little bit of what you said, is exploring what are all the tools now. If we have the time to actually look at all the tools, and that can help us in the future, this is a really good time to spend and invest in thinking about those things. Okay, yeah, Marianne.
We can sit, or we can choose to innovate and become better and become more efficient.
So I'm the only broker up here with these multifamily guys. So I'm going to speak to what I'm going to be doing in 24 and 25. And I think, Spencer, you had some graphs looking at deal volume. Heading into 2024, like every other brokerage house, we're going to be continuing to watch the CMBS watch lists for properties in various states of distress, and how we might be involved with helping dispose of those assets in the marketplace. And to that end, we'll be doing more broker opinions of value. There's no shortage of transactions and deals in the marketplace. The complexion just changes as economic times change. And I do think, speaking for myself, I'll be working every bit as harder into 24 and 25 to probably do the same amount of deals but make less, simply because of the impact of interest rates on deal values. And on, as that's sort of the sale and the acquisition side. On the acquisition side, every broker in this room is getting peppered by either bot emails, saying, I want to buy your property for 10 cents on the dollar, or some other ridiculous number. And somebody said earlier in the presentation, and it's true, Milwaukee, we don't have high highs, we don't have low lows. That's the great news about our marketplace. So while I expect to see a little bit more distress in the marketplace in 2024, I don't think the sky is falling, and people who don't have to sell aren't going to. So the properties that will trade will be the ones that really sort of are in a pickle, either because of not having the right balance when their note comes up for renewal. And there are other reasons people sell that appear distressed, but it's just bad timing to sell. They have health issues, they're moving, lots of reasons. And on the, I do, like, again, most brokers in Milwaukee, I do a lot of tenant representation and buyer agency. And one of the things that is the most interesting conversations to be having with tenants when you're representing one of them is they are mystified as to how rents can be higher in the wake of the pandemic, and how there can be a shortage of quality office space. And that seems counterintuitive, but it's not. And I ask people to think about, what have costs done in your own personal life, in your household? Well, building owners, even if they don't have a loan hanging over their head, and increased more principal and interest payments on the loan servicing side, operating expenses are still up. Real estate taxes are up. The expense side of the whole rent equation is up. So minimally, that explains why rents are up. The best buildings and the best locations are doing well. And across the board, even in, forgive the term, the crappy buildings, the ones that we increasingly have fewer and fewer of here in Milwaukee, are still more expensive than they were prior to the pandemic because costs have increased. The owners who are in the best position to cut deals, if they want to, are the ones who have existing conditions that a tenant can drop into without a ton of new cash being spent, because the minute you got to swing a hammer, the deal's gone. You're at market rate. So I'm going to be continuing to just do all of those types of activities, and then see how interest rates evolve and what new opportunities that creates.
I like that. It brings up my two takeaways from what you said are, one, Not high highs, not low lows here in Milwaukee. We kind of know that. If we're just waiting for the bad to come so that we can swoop in, this is probably not going to happen here, which makes sense. You didn't mention in terms of expenses, but specifically insurance, which I know that, man, that has been rough. So that is another big driver, I know, in that equation. Kevin, how about you guys with Royal Capital? Maybe not just here, Atlanta, all of it.
I don't like to mention those other cities while I'm in Milwaukee. But no, so we certainly are in growth mode, cautious growth mode. We did set up an Atlanta office to help us capture more of the Southeast, and we will be doing more business in Illinois. I sit on the board for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago. And that was kind of an effort to kind of help us capture more influence inside of the Midwest. So we'll be continue to develop in the Midwest with Miami. Not Miami. Sorry, Milwaukee being our primary place of business. And plug, I sit on the board for Visit Milwaukee, our tourist community here. So I'm definitely committed to the city of Milwaukee. But when we look ahead at the business model, we're still very bullish because we're talking about an industry that has a supply issue and not a demand issue. And so we're very confident that when the markets align themselves that, we'll be ready for the punch to kind of push ahead and push out the product that we're excited about. We're still doing a significant amount of acquisitions. We're doing some land acquisitions, which has been good because we're able to buy at a low basis and not have a significant hit on the balance sheet, which has been great. But we're also looking at traditional multifamily acquisitions as well. Not so much in the Midwest right now. We're kind of focusing on growth markets, and that's been something that's been good for business. So we're really excited about it. So again, we will continue to grow the national footprint, but I just believe that Milwaukee will always be a significant portion of the business, and that we'll continue to double down our efforts here and fight through any challenges. I mean, we're not afraid of a fight. So this stuff is all par for the course and normal part of the business. So we're excited about being here, and I think that Milwaukee as a region, and I think the state of Wisconsin, we have a lot of product in Madison and Kenosha and so forth. I really, really think, having spent time in these other communities, that we're just as good for growth as anybody else. So I'm excited about what's ahead in 25. 24, we'll see. 25, I'm really excited.
Great. Derek, tell us about Three Leaf, what you guys are looking for in 2024. But also talk to us a little bit about, Kevin brought up a really good point about Visit Milwaukee and the way that we talk about ourselves and opportunities that we have. And you spoke passionately about this before, about how we should be talking about that too. So give us that why Wisconsin pitch, but also tell us about Three Leaf.
Yeah. So what are we going to do in 2024? So we're a newer development shop as we've been constituted. Our partners, Matt, who I mentioned earlier, and Pat Connaughton from the Milwaukee Bucks, when they decided to forge this partnership that is Three Leaf Partners, it was January 1st of 2022. We saw the survey sentiment earlier. We already knew that the market wasn't going to be as hot in 2022 or 2023, but they made that decision consciously. So we've built a team over the last 2 years now. We have that team in place. We think it's a great team, and now we're in the position to execute and to really help our partners. We have a lot of relationship partners, whether it's I mentioned Saukville. That's a deal we did in partnership with Ansay Development. Other examples where we've partnered with Mandel on Taxco, for example. We're open to partnerships. We're open to finding ways to do deals with others. We've also got a model where we help nonprofits and faith-based institutions realize their vision. That's something that Matt's done for a very long time, and Pat's done as well with his connections with both the Lutheran Church and Catholic Church, respectively. We think there's opportunity there as well, as it's no secret that churches are facing attendance challenges, and they have, the Catholic Church is the largest landowner in the United States and the world. And so there are opportunities there to help them find a way to support their mission beyond what they've been doing traditionally for the last 100 or thousands of years. We with that also brings other creative opportunities, like Tim was talking about. What else can you do to finance a project? There are some faith-based debt funds and other funds of that nature, and equity funds or philanthropic equity investment type opportunities that we have been able to tap into and will tap into again. So I guess in short, we're going to develop in 2024 because we're a developer. We're also going to buy assets, or we're going to acquire assets. We've started that strategy about a month ago. We bought our first industrial asset in West Bend. We're closing today after we get out of here on another industrial asset in the Madison market. We have another one that'll follow behind that in the Twin Cities market. Point being is that our investors and our base, they still have appetite to do deals and to put money to work, and we're going to find opportunities to do that with them and to set ourselves up for growth and to kind of have a 2024 Thrive plan, which is, are there opportunities to find some value in deals, whether it's multifamily or industrial deals, and add that to a portfolio while we continue to get creative and work with our lending partners. And I think, hopefully the banks will be able to come back to the market, and as rates hopefully stabilize, and maybe the 10-year rates will come down at some point to match where current rates are. So that's what we're going to do. And then we're also in 2024, we're going to pound our chest, like Kevin mentioned earlier, and really just be unabashed about how much we love Wisconsin and how much we love Milwaukee. We're on the world stage coming up next summer. As a proud Texan, everybody knows that Texans love to talk about how great Texas is. I think that's a good thing. I think we should do more of that in Wisconsin. I think sometimes the sentiment is, we don't want the secret to get out about how great Milwaukee is. I think that we should let the secret get out about how great Milwaukee is and encourage people to come here, to visit here, to move here, to live here, to educate here, all those things. So we're going to do all of that in 2024. And we think it's going to be a great year, a challenging year, but it'll be a great year.
Nobody's busier than Derek in 2024, clearly. And thank you. But one thing that I want to pull out of this, and then Spencer, I'm going to have you reflect back on this, is partnerships. My goodness, Matt and Pat coming together to form Three Leaf Partners, pretty incredible. The partnership that you started to explore with Ansay and the non-traditional way of looking at housing that you've done with them in Saukville, really interesting. Giannis and Dame partnership, great. Okay, we're all about partnerships in Milwaukee. I'm fascinated by that idea and that thought for all of us to start thinking more strategically about, are there partners out there where we could exponentially find opportunities in the future? 2024 feels like a great time to do that. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Spencer, reflect back on us. Maybe this is what you would do in 2024, how you'd be preparing, or maybe just tell us here in Milwaukee what you think we should be looking at.
So one of the things that I do is I meet with the capital every day. I don't just meet with developers. I don't just meet with occupiers. I meet with the money. And I sometimes meet with international capital. And there's a lot of international capital that's looking for the Milwaukee types of market. And so what I would be doing, and I have people that are developers, just like the folks up here on the stage, are trying to set up their joint ventures for the long term. Because a lot of the stereotype around some institutional investors that they'll only go to the top 25 MSAs. That's not true. And I think that post-COVID, talking about the meteor hitting the earth, I didn't make my point well enough, is that it had a lot of ramifications for our business. One of it is I think that the circle of places that institutional or quasi-institutional capital will look at is broader now. It will be to some of these smaller markets. And don't be embarrassed to go out and do this. So one success story is the Northern Virginia market, where 5 years before Amazon chose them as HQ2, they had an outreach towards capital in the Middle East and Europe and Asia. And we're literally jumping around. So some of the folks on this stage are part of the Greater Milwaukee Visitors Bureau. Well, do you have a Greater Milwaukee, I'm going to go around the world with a hat in hand asking for money bureau? That's much like the comment that was made before. Small ball works. And sometimes just showing up at the doorstep of some sovereign wealth fund works. And so I would say in 24, when we're not doing as many deals as we thought, set up your partnerships for 25.
I love that, yeah. And if we bring some cheese and beer, it's going to go well no matter where.
Well, with me yesterday.
But we'll bring instructions, unlike your Mexican Mexican example. Yeah, exactly. All right, I want to round it out. Thank you everybody for the questions today. We're going to dive into one last thing for each of our panelists to respond to. I will tell you, I've been able to touch on a few, but not nearly all. One of the beauties of being at an event like BizTimes, sponsored is that we can step back from today and I can share these questions with the BizTimes so that some of these things we can dive into more with their coverage. So thank you for that. They did not ask me to say that. I'm just saying I hope Hunter writes about it because I want to read about it too. So let's bring it home with kind of one last question. We're going to be sitting here a year from now. Dan, I assume we'll come back to the BCC, but maybe the ICC. We'll see. We'll let them battle it out. What do you hope to be able to say a year from now that we experienced in the last year? What do you hope a year from now when we're sitting here, you look back and you say, you hope this thing happened? Spencer, actually, let's start with you, and we're going to work backwards.
Look, from a macro perspective, I really hope that we have a short and shallow recession and interest rates come down a lot faster than we think. And they could. So I hope I say that, because if we do that, the transaction market will unlock. Completely off topic, but I really hope that some of the political polarization gets less bad. But unfortunately, next year it's probably going to get worse.
Okay. I knew you weren't going to say you hope that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce stay together. Mm-hmm. Because you said you stopped paying attention to that stuff in the 90s. So, yeah. Right.
I think I'm going to say that hopefully we can look back on 2024 and say that it led to some sort of catalytic job opportunity in the southeastern Wisconsin market with a major corporate relocation occurring here. Maybe that stems out of having all the leaders across our country be here and congregate here next summer. That's what I hope we can look back on, and then I think we'll also look back and think fondly of the Dallas Cowboys winning the Super Bowl.
Okay. Oh.
Wow. Save that till the end.
He's a big dreamer.
So, Kevin, your rebuttal.
I want to say Go-Pack. Go-Pack go so bad, but man, we've been bad. But I know you guys feel now. So
there's hope for them in 2024, though, too. So that's.
I don't know. But, go Bucks, go.
There we go.
I'll say this. From a geopolitical standpoint, I would hope to see that the distress in the Middle East, it will be settled in a much more peaceful manner. That's one. And I think that has a global impact on the overall global economy. So I think that's going to be very, very important for us to find peace there. Secondly, I think that the 10-year Treasury, which is a good indicator of where interest rates are trending in terms of the cost of capital, we're at 4.40. I woke up this morning, we get closer to 3.75, 4%. I mean, we're like game on, right, for 24. So I'm excited about the opportunity for us to kind of do that. I'm also, we start talking about, I need to plug this a little bit because I'm going to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago event when I leave here in Milwaukee. Again, invite them up here to do some programs. Mm-hmm. We're working on that program there where we're talking about how do we fund more talent into the real estate development space. The Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago is like many other entities that will have a lot more capital to do things differently. And so we're going to be throwing off significant capital. I'm not talking about $10 million or even $20 million. I'm talking about real capital that will be need to be reprogrammed, that we don't have dollars or buckets. We have buckets for. And that's going to be an annual commitment that we'll have over the next 3 years. So I just think that we need to make sure that in Milwaukee, that we're tapping into some of these resources and getting at the table really, really early. And I foresee us being able to do that now because we'll have less busy hands and we'll be bringing, again, just so everybody knows, my portfolio, 98% of the capital comes from outside of Wisconsin. So I'm a big proponent of trying to make sure that we can leverage capital as an import as we continue to try to drive business here. So I foresee us being able to do a significant job of doing that in 2024.
I love that. Marianne?
I hope the lending community works with, can find a way through 2024 and early 2025 to work with people who have notes renewing and who need a little assistance or further support to get through this window of time that we're in. And hopefully, per Spencer's prognostications, by 2025 we are in a better place and we avoid some of that fallout. And in the meantime, I agree that there is sort of a generational opportunity, even here in Milwaukee, to pick up some great assets. over the next year or so, and that those buyers capitalize on the opportunity while it's in front of them.
I like that. Didn't get the chance to say stay alive until 25 yet on this, so if that's on your bingo card, I said it. But to your point, thank you, Marianne. And Tim?
So we broke ground on Ascent in 2020, right? We broke ground on a $130 million project in Milwaukee in the fall of 2020. We started that capital raise in spring of 2020, and in July of 2020, we lost our capital stack, the signed LOI that we had backed out. And so the hope was that we were going to be able to build this project. The work that went into it was calling every single person until everything was exhausted. And then I saw you earlier, Linda. I called Linda Gorins, and on a super duper long shot, and I mean on a connection that her 3-year-old son had at some other firm, we got a $25 million loan for Ascent, the mezzanine, and we built that project. That's what ultimately backs up hope is perseverance. And so on a personal level, I actually hope that 2024 is going to be a huge year for Newland. We've got 2 projects on deck in Walker's Point, and I hope that we're going to be able to get them through, but I think we will because we're going to pound on every single door and explore every single partnership. There are some huge RFPs coming out through the city of Milwaukee, and so I hope that they will continue to be catalysts both for our organization but the city as a whole. And then I hope that, to build on Derek's point, right, I hope we remember that in 2020, Milwaukee won the DNC. And next year, we're going to host the RNC. And we have one of the best return to office markets in the country. And we have one of the strongest residential markets in the country. And so I hope that we remember that, as tough as all the national economic news are. I hope that we remember that we're in one of the really, truly best cities in the country that has a ton of potential, and we coalesce around Milwaukee and around the big ideas that can be had in Milwaukee, because when Milwaukee does well, the entire region does well.
That's great. All right. Thank you.
So thank you, panel. Thank you, Andy, for serving as moderator. I'd like to thank our partners for their support in helping make today's program possible. Building Advantage, CLA, Hush Blackwell, Johnson Financial Group, First Ring Industrial Development Enterprise, and thanks to exhibit sponsors, Acoustic Supply, CBRE, Innovative Signs, and JLA Architects. And a big thanks to Tracy and CarW for your help, and Andy, thanks again for your partnership at Marquette. So on behalf of BizTimes and our sponsors and our presenters and all the panelists, thanks for coming. Have a great holiday season, make it a great day, and we'll see you next year.